A doctor's duty is to help people. Bringing back smiles to people's faces is my mission as a doctor. It's something that can never be weighed by money. I believe it holds immense, immeasurable value. That's why
My mom is sick. We can't afford her medicine. But I thought, maybe if I could gather the ingredients, you might be able to make it from them.
I couldn't turn my back on the earnest little girl who was trying to help her sick mother. Even if everyone else abandoned her, I would be the one to take her hand. So, I accepted the various plants she had gathered, hoping they might be used to make the medicine. Wait, could it be this plant? My name is Sean Anderson. It's been several years since I took over the clinic my father used to run. Every day, I dedicate myself to the patients at this small clinic. The clinic has been a part of the community since my father's time, and for many years, it has been a trusted place for countless people. When my father was alive, the clinic thrived thanks to the community's trust. The clinic room was always bustling with patients, and the medical receptionists and nurses worked tirelessly. Days begin with a flurry of patient care. When I open the clinic doors in the morning, several patients are already seated in the waiting room. Jessica Green, the medical receptionist, greeted me warmly.
Good morning, Sean. Looks like we're going to have another busy day.
Good morning, Jessica. Yes, let's do our best. Jessica has been working at the clinic since my father's time. She's a veteran medical receptionist and an invaluable member of the team. Her presence is a huge support for me. Mornings at the clinic are always hectic. First, I review the patient records to understand the day's appointments. It's essential not only to grasp the patient's symptoms and treatment progress, but also to consider their individual backgrounds and living situations. The patients who come to our clinic often face more than just physical ailments. They bring a variety of worries with them. Like my father, I strive to be someone who can connect with their hearts. When I opened the door to the examination room, the first patient was already seated, waiting for me. Smiling, I took my seat and looked at the patient's face. Thank you for waiting. How can I help you today?
Doctor, I've been having trouble sleeping lately.
The patient was an elderly man who visited the clinic regularly. His face showed signs of fatigue, and I could sense that his condition wasn't great. As I conducted the consultation, I listened carefully to his concerns. Just as my father taught me, I tried to pay close attention to my patient's words, picking up on the emotions and anxieties behind them. Let's try to figure out why you're having trouble sleeping. Have you noticed anything bothering you recently?
Not really, but I feel a bit lighter after talking to you, doctor.
When a patient says something like that, it warms my heart a little, too. Between consultations, Karen Smith, one of the nurses, discreetly supports me. She has also been working here since my father's time.
Sean, we're running low on some medications. Could you check later?
Thanks, Karen. I'll look into it as soon as we're done here. Karen is always a reliable presence, providing precise support. I'm constantly grateful for her efficiency and skill. However, since my father passed away in an accident, the clinic's financial situation has been declining steadily. The number of patients has decreased, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to cover the operating costs. It's something that was unimaginable during my father's time, but now we're facing economic challenges. Government funding seems to prioritize large hospitals, leaving small private clinics like ours with almost no support. During lunch breaks, it's our routine to eat together with the staff. Today, I brought a packed sandwich I grabbed at a nearby deli. While opening my lunch in the staff room, we chatted about the daily operations of the clinic and happenings in the community.
Sean, things have been financially tough lately, haven't they?
Yeah, honestly, it's been rough, but as long as patients keep coming, I think we can manage.
You really care about your patients, don't you? But please don't overwork yourself.
Thank you, Karen, but this is what I want to do. Hearing my words, both of them gave me kind smiles. Even when the clinic is running in the red, seeing patients leave with smiles on their faces reassures me this is how it should be. As the afternoon appointments began, patients started coming in one after another. From seniors to children, each patient reminds me of my purpose. In this place my father protected for so long, I feel it's my mission to safeguard the health of the local community. By the time evening rolled around and consultations were done, it was already dark outside. Though fatigue washed over me, I still felt a sense of fulfillment. I turned off the lights and locked the clinic doors. Tomorrow, I'll be back here again for the sake of my patients. This is my everyday life, and it's also my pride. Then, one day, after finishing the morning consultations, I finally had a moment to catch my breath. Loosening my white coat, I stepped out of the examination room and walked into the waiting room. It was eerily quiet, as if the morning's hustle and bustle had been a lie. The only sound was the ticking of the clock in the otherwise empty waiting room. I stretched my slightly tired body and approached the window. Outside, the soft afternoon sunlight illuminated the garden's trees. As the sunlight filtered through the leaves, their shadows danced on the ground. Watching this tranquil scene, a nostalgic memory suddenly surfaced in my mind. I remembered the days when my father was still alive. Back when the clinic was full of energy, he worked tirelessly to see every patient. Growing up watching his back, my father was someone I deeply respected above all else. It was only natural for me to want to follow the path he had walked as a doctor. I remembered a day when I was still a medical student and visited the clinic. My father had just finished a consultation and invited me into the waiting room. With his usual gentle gaze, he smiled at me.
Sean, how's medical school going? It must be tough.
Yeah, it's honestly hard, but my desire to become a doctor hasn't changed. Hearing my words, my father nodded in satisfaction.
That's the spirit. The path of a doctor is never easy, but there's no job more rewarding than saving lives.
Those words are still etched deeply in my heart. My father always put patients first and gave his all to each one, no matter how busy he was. To a young me, his dedication was the ideal. I realized that the trust and love the community had for him came from his sincere attitude. Dad, do you think I can become a doctor that everyone trusts, just like you?
Sean, you absolutely can. But the most important thing is to have a strong desire to save the patient in front of you. If you have that, you can overcome any obstacle.
Got it. I'll become a doctor like you, Dad. That conversation still vividly resonates with me. My father's words have always been a source of support as I walked the path of becoming a doctor. Even after his passing, I have carried those words in my heart and continued to protect the clinic. However, everything changed the day my father passed away in an accident. Running the clinic on my own, the financial challenges began to weigh heavily. Government funding is now mostly directed toward large hospitals, leaving little for small clinics like ours. The number of patients keeps declining, and the clinic is struggling to stay afloat. Sometimes, I find myself questioning the meaning of continuing to run this clinic. I often find myself torn between wanting to protect the place my father left behind and the harsh realities I face. To keep the clinic running, I need to see more patients, but financial challenges always get in the way. There are moments when the vibrant days of my father's time feel like nothing more than a fleeting illusion. Loneliness has threatened to crush me many times, but even so, I've held on to my father's words and made it this far. The thought of wanting to save the patient in front of me is the only thing keeping me going. By continuing to follow in my father's footsteps, I strive to protect what he left behind. This is my mission and my pride as a doctor. Taking a deep breath, I stood up from my chair. The afternoon sunlight grew stronger, making the green garden outside the clinic window appear even more vivid. I straightened the collar of my white coat, preparing to welcome the next patient. To protect the clinic my father left behind, I take another step forward today. Just then, the clinic door opened with a small creak. Hearing the sound, I looked up to see a young girl standing there. Her small frame contrasted with the resolute look in her eyes as she gazed straight at me. "Welcome. What brings you here?" When I asked, the girl quietly extended her small hand to show me what she was holding. It was a plant. Though the flowers and leaves were slightly dried, it was clear she had handled them carefully. The moment I saw the plant, I couldn't help but frown. Why does this child have something like this? Questions flooded my mind.
Could this be used to make medicine?
Did you bring this plant hoping I could make medicine with it?
Yes. We can't afford to buy medicine.
Her face was a mix of faint hope and barely concealed anxiety. Seeing her expression, I couldn't help but imagine her situation. For someone so young to take action, trying her best to do something for the sake of getting medicine. I could see how desperate she must have been. I crouched down slowly to meet her gaze. "Who is the medicine for?" She hesitated a bit before looking me in the eye and answering.
My mom is sick. We can't afford medicine, but I thought maybe if we had the ingredients, we could make it.
Did you gather this plant all by yourself?
Yes. I found it in the nearby woods. I thought it might help, for my mom.
Her innocent words made me narrow my eyes slightly. The sight of this young girl, doing everything she could for her mother, stirred something deeply emotional in me. I took the plants from her and noticed one that looked familiar. Wait, could this plant be? It was you. It was a plant my father, a botanist, had studied during his lifetime. A rare plant. But it isn't just rare, it is special. To think that this plant could be found around here. In my surprise, I couldn't help but think this was more than just coincidence. Hey, this plant is very special. Thanks to you finding it. It might be the key to helping your mom." Hearing this, her face lit up instantly.
Really? This plant can help?
"Yes, it just might. But first, can I take a look at your mom's condition?" Emily seemed a little surprised, but nodded right away.
Yes, please come to our house. Please help my mom.
I quickly packed up my medical tools and prepared to leave, following Emily as she led the way to her home. Along the way, Emily began to share bits and pieces about her mother. Since her mother became ill, their family finances had been stretched to the limit, leaving them unable to afford medicine. Seeing her mother suffer, Emily thought about what she could do to help and decided to gather plants and bring them to the clinic.
My mom always tells me, it's okay, but at night, she looks like she's in so much pain.
That must have been tough, Emily, but I promise your efforts won't go to waste. I'll do everything I can to help her. Hearing my words, Emily's face softened slightly. For a girl driven solely by the desire to save her mother, the possibility that her efforts might pay off must have been a great relief. When we arrived at Emily's home, she ran inside.
Mom, the doctor's here to help.
Her voice carried a sense of relief, as though the fear she had been holding onto was finally letting go. I followed Emily into the house, steeling myself for the examination ahead. In front of me was a mother battling an illness, and a young girl desperately wishing to save her. I resolved to do everything in my power to support them. When I arrived at their house and opened the door, the inside was quiet and slightly dim. Guided by Emily, I felt a mix of tension and unease as we approached the bedroom. Emily opened the door, and her mom, Rachel, was lying on the bed. Her complexion was pale, and she looked visibly fatigued. As we entered the room, she widened her eyes in surprise.
Emily, why did you bring a doctor here?
I smiled gently at Rachel and began to explain. My name is Sean Anderson. Your daughter came to the clinic hoping to help you. The examination is free, so please don't worry. Though Rachel looked a bit hesitant, she seemed to notice Emily's earnestness and nodded after a moment.
I can't believe. Thank you. But why are you doing so much for me?
It's my mission to help patients, and your daughter's feelings touched me deeply. Please, let me do everything I can to help. She gave a faint smile before closing her eyes. I quietly began her examination. As I proceeded, I confirmed that Rachel's symptoms were caused by cancer. The diagnosis made me catch my breath, but I quickly composed myself and began considering the best course of action for her. Fortunately, the cancer was still at a stage where it could be treated with medication. Even so, knowing the fear the word cancer might bring, I carefully thought about how to deliver the news. Rachel, I have the results to share with you. She looked at me intently, her face tense with worry. I spoke in the calmest tone I could muster. The examination revealed that you have cancer. However, the good news is that it's still treatable with medication. If we start treatment early, we can stop the progression of the disease. I strongly recommend starting treatment at the clinic and considering hospitalization. The moment she heard the word cancer, Rachel's expression clouded over. She let out a deep sigh, lowered her gaze in distress, and fell silent. After a long pause, she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper.
I can't do that.
I was taken aback and asked her again. Why not? If we start treatment now, We can stop the disease. If left untreated, it could become too late. Rachel glanced at my face for a moment, before lowering her gaze to the floor again. Her expression was filled with deep worry and resignation.
Doctor, this might not concern you, but I had a husband once. He failed in his business and eventually left us. He abandoned our family and disappeared. I haven't heard from him in years, and I don't even know where he is.
That must have been so hard.
Yes, but that's not all. Financially, we're struggling. I can't possibly afford to be hospitalized. I can't pay for the costs, and Emily has no one else to rely on but me. If I'm not here, what will happen to her?
Her voice was filled with despair and fear. Hearing her words, I felt the weight of the burden Rachel carried. To move forward with treatment, I realized I needed to address not just her physical illness, but also the emotional struggles she was facing. Rachel, I understand that financial concerns are a major obstacle, but right now, your life is what matters most. You need to get better for Emily's sake too. She fell silent again, but I continued. Please don't worry about the hospital expenses. The clinic will provide as much support as possible. Also, Emily can stay at the clinic with you. I'll make sure the environment allows her to be by your side. Rachel lifted her head and looked at me intently. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she shook her head.
Doctor, I can't possibly accept such generosity. I can't let you do so much for me.
Rachel, I want to save you. Please think of your life as being in my hands at this very moment. Trust me to do what's best for you. Hearing those words, Rachel remained silent for a while, but eventually nodded slowly.
Thank you, doctor.
I smiled back and gently held her hand. Her hand was cold and trembling slightly. As I thought about what would be best for both her and Emily, I solidified my resolve. It was now my mission to protect and support this family. Back at the clinic, I immediately reviewed Rachel Saunders' treatment plan. Given her condition, it was clear that time was limited. I checked the clinic's medicine cabinet to see how much of the necessary medication we had left. But at that moment, my heart nearly stopped. The stock of chemotherapy drugs was almost completely depleted. A wave of panic rose in my chest, and I quickly contacted our pharmaceutical supplier. Gripping the phone tightly, I felt my palms growing sweaty as I took deep breaths to steady myself. Rachel's life depended on this call. It was the key to saving her. As the dial tone echoed, my heartbeat quickened, pounding loudly in my ears.
Hello, this is the Pharmaceutical Supply Center.
A calm voice answered on the other end of the line. This is Sean Anderson from Anderson Clinic. I'm sorry to trouble you, but we urgently need chemo agents. Is there any way to get them immediately? My voice betrayed my tension. There was no time to waste. To save Rachel's life, every second mattered.
Dr. Anderson, thank you for reaching out. Chemotherapy agents, is it? One moment, please.
I heard the sound of a keyboard as they checked their inventory. During that time, I waited silently. The seconds felt like hours, and my heart raced even faster.
Thank you for waiting. We have the medication in stock, but delivery will take 2 weeks.
Those words made my heart sink. 2 weeks? Isn't there any way to get it sooner? The patient's condition is very serious. I struggled to keep my voice steady, though my desperation was clear.
I'm sorry. but given the current distribution situation, that's the fastest we can manage. Demand has surged nationwide, and all medical facilities are facing similar delays.
But we can't wait 2 weeks. This is a matter of life and death. Isn't there anything you can do, even if it's just a small amount? On the phone, I could feel my voice trembling. Rachel's face came to mind, and I was filled with a strong determination not to give up.
Dr. Anderson, I'll do everything I can to expedite the delivery. However, prioritizing the stock immediately is difficult. Every medical facility is in the same situation, all with patients depending on them.
I understand, but... The operator's voice softened a little as I desperately pressed on.
I understand how you feel, doctor. I'll do everything I can on my end. If there's a cancellation or surplus stock from another hospital, I'll contact you immediately. Until then, I hope the patient's condition remains stable.
Those words filled me with gratitude, yet an unshakable sense of anxiety lingered. Thank you. I appreciate your help. After hanging up, I stood frozen for a moment. We can't wait 2 weeks. Considering Rachel's condition, that's far too long. I desperately racked my brain for a solution, but no answers came. Damn it. The words slipped out unconsciously. Startled by my own outburst, I bit my lip hard. I'm a doctor. There is no time to lose my composure. No matter what happens, it's my mission to save my patients. Standing there frozen, I gradually calmed myself. Determined to protect Rachel and Emily no matter what challenges lay ahead, I headed back to the consultation room. It'll be okay, I'll figure something out, I muttered to myself, as if to reaffirm my determination, and sat down in the chair in the consultation room. To continue Rachel's treatment, I needed to stay calm. I knew that panicking would solve nothing. So, I carefully re-examined her treatment plan and began considering the best course of action. It seemed my anxiety was beginning to show. Rachel asked me,
Dr. Anderson, are you okay?
Her gentle voice eased my tension slightly. Despite understanding her own condition, it was clear she was more concerned about me. Rachel, are you okay? Please let me know if you're feeling even a little discomfort.
Thank you. I feel reassured knowing you're here, doctor.
Her words gave me a bit of relief, but internally, I couldn't shake my anxiety. How could we get through the next 2 weeks until the chemo agents arrived? That was now my most pressing challenge. If it's just 2 weeks, we should be able to manage. I'll make it work somehow. With renewed determination, I returned to the consultation room. I poured all my energy into continuing Rachel's treatment while looking for ways to ease her burden, even just a little. The desire to save my patients drove me forward. No matter the challenges, I vowed to protect Rachel and Emily. That resolve remained unshaken. However, those peaceful days didn't last long. One afternoon, bathed in the warm sunlight streaming through the clinic window, I watched Rachel and Emily happily chatting together. Rachel's condition had stabilized, and her smile was gradually returning. Emily seemed relieved that her mother was recovering, and seeing the two of them together brought me a small sense of comfort as well. But that sense of reassurance was fleeting. By evening, as the clinic quieted down, Rachel suddenly clutched her chest in pain and collapsed onto the bed. Rachel, "Are you okay?" I rushed over to her and found her forehead burning with an abnormally high fever. Her complexion had rapidly turned pale, her breathing was labored, and sweat dripped from her forehead. Emily, startled, rushed to her mother's side and clutched her hand tightly, but Rachel could only groan in pain, unable even to open her eyes. "Emily, please step back for just a moment." Emily looked up at me with fear in her eyes, but quickly nodded and took a step back. Taking a deep breath to steady myself, I focused on assessing Rachel's condition. Her body temperature had already spiked to nearly 104 Fahrenheit. It was an abnormal fever. Pressing the stethoscope to her chest, I could clearly hear her labored, uneven breathing. It seemed inflammation was spreading in her lungs. What's more, her strength was visibly deteriorating. I can't believe her condition is worsening this quickly. For a brief moment, fear gripped my mind. At this rate, she could lose her life. I immediately began preparing for treatment, but the anxiety wouldn't go away. Without the chemotherapy agents yet delivered, how much could I actually do to save her? I kept asking myself this question over and over. It was a race against time. Rachel's breathing grew shallower by the minute, and her entire body trembled. I set up an IV drip and administered antipyretics, but the effects were less than I had hoped. I could almost feel her body waging a fierce battle against the illness. I checked her complexion again, reminding myself to stay calm. "Hang in there, Rachel. I won't give up on you now." I didn't know if my words were reaching her, but I continued whispering encouragement into her ear. Emily looked at me with worried eyes. I didn't want her to experience such pain. I had to save Rachel somehow. For hours, I monitored Rachel's condition and tried everything I could, but her situation showed no signs of improvement. Her consciousness was fading, and her strength was slipping away with each passing moment. Despite feeling an internal sense of urgency, I was determined to find a solution. To save the patient in front of me, I had to explore every possible option. Damn it, the medicine still hasn't arrived. As my frustration mounted, a thought suddenly struck me. The plant Emily had brought that day. The yew tree. I remembered something my father once told me. He had mentioned that the yew might have anti-cancer properties. I had never considered it before, but in this dire situation, it was the only option left to try. That's it, the yew. In that moment, everything seemed to connect. If this plant truly had medicinal properties, it might be the key to saving Rachel. Wasting no time, I headed straight to the lab. This was the critical moment. With a renewed vow to do everything possible for my patient, I began analyzing the plant's components. Time was not on my side. Though driven by urgency, I worked steadily and methodically. Drawing on my father's research and my own knowledge, I extracted the yew's active compounds and processed them into a form that could serve as a makeshift treatment. Once everything was ready, I returned to Rachel's side. Her condition was still unstable, but if I didn't act now, there would be no more chances. I quietly prepared a syringe and injected the solution into her arm. "Please, may it be effective." I prayed silently over and over, my eyes fixed on Rachel's face. Whether this treatment would succeed or not, her life hung in the balance. As time seemed to crawl unbearably slowly, all I could do was keep hoping for Rachel's recovery. After several tense hours, Rachel's temperature began to drop gradually, and her breathing started to stabilize. Seeing the color return to her face and her pained expression soften, I finally let out a deep sigh of relief. Rachel was saved. The plant Emily had brought had saved her life. "Emily, your mom's going to be okay now. You can relax." When I told her this, Emily burst into tears and clung to her mother's hand. Watching that scene, I felt my own heart swell with emotion. Saving Rachel's life brought me the greatest joy of all. I was also deeply grateful that my father's knowledge had once again played a vital role in saving a patient. This experience marked a major turning point in my journey as a doctor. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I was determined to give my all to save my patients. That resolve was etched deeper into my heart than ever before. From the day Rachel's treatment succeeded, subtle changes began to take shape at my clinic. After discovering that the plant Emily brought indeed had anti-cancer properties, I compiled my findings into a research paper and presented them at a medical conference. It was a moment that reaffirmed my father's words, that plants held untapped potential. The presentation garnered significant attention. In particular, the pharmaceutical industry saw the discovery as a breakthrough that could drastically reduce manufacturing costs. Unlike traditional, expensive chemotherapy drugs, the ability to use natural plant-derived compounds for treatment captured the interest of many experts. I never imagined that a discovery made in my small clinic, working with patients day in and day out, could cause such a ripple effect. After that, I received numerous recruitment offers from various hospitals. Many invitations came from major and university hospitals, with promises of abundant funding and advanced facilities for research. But my decision had already been made. Continuing to protect this clinic that I inherited from my father is the most important mission in my life. No matter how tempting the offers were, my resolve to save the patients right in front of me in this small clinic remained steadfast. Meanwhile, Rachel had fully recovered and had begun working at the clinic as an assistant. She was diligent, hardworking, and always attentive to the needs of the patients. The gradual stabilization of the clinic's operations was undoubtedly thanks to her help. As I spent more time working alongside her, I found myself increasingly drawn to her. Her smile, her kindness, and her strength to remain composed no matter how difficult things became. All of it had become something irreplaceable to me. However, knowing she was married, I struggled to suppress those feelings, which caused me considerable anguish. "Rachel, thank you for everything. You've been such a great help."
Thank you, doctor. It's because of you that I'm able to be here today.
Rachel's words made my heart ache a little. While I was happy she considered me her savior, her gratitude also stirred a complicated mix of emotions within me. Let's continue working together to keep the clinic going. Together, we can help even more patients.
Yes, doctor. That's exactly what I want to do.
Her firm reply reassured me, even as I forced myself to suppress my feelings further. With each passing day spent working together, my growing affection for her became harder to ignore. However, protecting this clinic and saving my patients is the most important thing to me. And for Rachel, I knew it was my responsibility to respect her and maintain an appropriate distance. Despite my inner struggles, we continued working side by side, dedicating ourselves to the patients and protecting the clinic. The time I spent with Rachel remained the happiest moments of my life. One evening, after finishing Rachel's usual checkup, I sat down with her and Emily to enjoy some coffee. Life at a clinic had gradually become more familiar and comfortable for them, and our time together was peaceful and pleasant. But that tranquility was abruptly shattered when the clinic door was thrown open. Standing in the doorway was an unfamiliar man. His imposing demeanor immediately changed the atmosphere in the room.
Rachel, it's me. I asked around and found out you were here.
The moment I heard those words, I realized this man was Thomas, Rachel's husband. Rachel froze in place, standing as if paralyzed, the color draining from her face. Emily clung to her mother, trembling in fear.
Thomas, why now?
Rachel's voice trembled, heavy with the pain of her past. Her words carried the weight of the betrayal she had shared with me, the deep wounds Thomas had inflicted upon her. She had been betrayed and deeply hurt by Thomas in the past. And now, his reappearance had reopened those wounds.
Don't look so scared. I've changed. I've reflected on my mistakes. My business has settled down, and I want us to be a family again.
Thomas' voice lacked any genuine remorse. Instead, his tone revealed an air of self-centered arrogance. Hearing Thomas' words, which ignored Rachel's feelings and imposed his own selfish demands, I felt a surge of anger welling up from the depths of my stomach.
I'll never live with you again.
But at that moment, Thomas' demeanor changed completely. His face turned cold, and the words that followed froze both Rachel and me in place.
Well, what kind of tone is that? Do you not care what happens to your parents' restaurant?
Rachel's expression instantly stiffened. I remembered her telling me before that the land on which her parents' restaurant stood was owned by Thomas. She had chosen to marry him to protect her parents' livelihood.
If you live with me, I'll make sure the restaurant is safe. But if you don't, well, you know what'll happen, don't you?
I understand. Please, just don't. Please spare the restaurant.
Rachel muttered weakly, holding back tears. Seeing her in such a vulnerable state, I felt a powerful urge to protect her, but I was filled with frustration at my inability to do anything in that moment. Thomas smiled smugly, looking down at Rachel as if he had already won. Suddenly, the clinic door opened again, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the room. When I turned to look, a man was standing there.
Looks like an interesting conversation's going on here.
The man who appeared was Leonard Woods, a former patient of mine, and, to put it bluntly, a man associated with organized crime syndicate. Dressed in a black suit with the same sharp gaze as always, he still carried an air of intensity, but I could see the humanity within him. That's precisely why, back then, I treated Leonard free of charge when he had no money. It was rare for Leonard to show up at this small clinic. I wondered what had brought him here today.
Doctor, I overheard a bit of the conversation.
Leonard, what brings you here? Before I could finish, Leonard stepped forward and turned to Thomas.
You must be Rachel's husband, huh?
Thomas, visibly shaken, took a step back under Leonard's intimidating presence.
Who the hell are you?
Me. I'm just a guy repaying a debt to a doctor who helped me out. Lately, I've also been grateful to Rachel for her help. So, I can't just stand by and do nothing when someone's in trouble.
Leonard's calm yet sharp voice made Thomas' fear even more apparent. He was completely overwhelmed by Leonard's commanding aura.
I heard you're trying to drag Rachel back into your mess, huh? And not letting that happen. I've heard a bit about her situation, and yours too. You're nothing but trash, a man with no honor.
Leonard's words were sharp and pierced Thomas deeply. Thomas stood frozen, unable to utter a single word for a while. Leonard, honestly, you've saved us.
I owe you a lot, Doctor. And when I think about Rachel and Emily, there's no way I could just stand by. By the way, Rachel.
Yes.
Rachel, don't worry about your parents' restaurant. As a favor to the doctor, my real estate company will lease you a new property and land for the restaurant. You don't have to rely on a scumbag like this.
What? I couldn't possibly accept such a generous offer.
The world's about helping each other. I learned that from the doctor.
Leonard turned back to Thomas.
So here's the deal. You're going to back off. Stay away from Rachel for good. That's my final warning.
Hearing those words, Thomas turned pale and stared at Leonard. His eyes were filled with unmistakable fear. He opened his mouth to respond, but ultimately closed it without saying anything. Watching him silently turn to leave, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you, Leonard. I don't know what we would be done without you.
That's one debt repaid, Doctor.
Leonard said, nodding silently as he walked out of the clinic. As I watched his figure disappear into the distance, a deep sense of gratitude swelled within my heart. After that, with Leonard's help, Rachel was able to finalize her divorce without any complications. Her parents' restaurant was saved, and for the first time, she showed a look of true relief. From the day Rachel and Emily began living at my clinic, our lives transformed into something peaceful and warm. The clinic's operations gradually stabilized as well. As we worked together each day, a strong bond formed between us. In time, that bond deepened into love, and eventually, Rachel and I decided to get married. The days I now spend with Rachel, Emily, and myself as a family are filled with more happiness than I ever imagined. Not only do I care for the smiles of the people in the community, but now I have 2 more smiles to protect. Though the weight of this responsibility is heavy, it gives me strength and fuels my dedication to my work every day.